Hi, everybody. This is Warren Herman, and so today what we're going to be talking about is a perspective that you can bring to bear to address the fears that we may have in the spiritual life. Sometimes when we are going through the spiritual life, we can be paying attention to whether we sin or not, and we can feel the pressure of worrying about these fluctuations in our state of grace, in our spirituality, and just seeing what's going on in ourselves. That can lead us to have some difficulties. We can definitely end up with some problems as a result of this because, sometimes people end up abandoning their Catholic faith because they can't stand the idea of these fluctuations, of these ups and downs. And so they end up wanting to turn to the Protestant idea of faith alone in order to deal with the problem of saying, oh, I sinned. What happens? Did I sin mortally? Am I going to hell now? They can't stand these ups and downs. So today what we're going to do is we're going to try to give a perspective on this that's going to illuminate this problem on a practical level and an everyday level, and deal with folks who are, going into those levels of scrupulosity where we're really living in that very deep fear of sin as a result of this. So the real problem in these situations can be summed up very much like what happens when you have the situation where Jesus is approaching the disciples. He's walking on water, and St. Peter comes out onto the water and begins to walk toward Jesus. And he's looking at Jesus, his eyes are on Jesus, and he's able to walk on the water. But when he looks at the wind and the waves and thinks about how it's going with himself on this journey, he looks down and then he starts to sink. And Jesus says, he basically says, "Why did you doubt? Why did you have faith? Those kind of things." I'm paraphrasing. But this image of this walking on water is very much what we need to think about, when we are trying to have this experience of faith and to walk through the spiritual life and to have some stability. How do you have stability? How do you walk on the water when things aren't stable? Because walking on water is like the truth of being a Catholic. Because the thing is, like, if we buy into the faith alone idea, we are really we're choosing to essentially like stand on a plank or stay in the boat or something. We're saying that it's not water. We're saying that it's not water. We're saying I can't sink, or we're saying I float. Because the Protestant idea that we have this imputed righteousness of Christ would almost be like saying I have a flotation device inside of me. That's the same thing. So it's not that we don't want to attribute things to ourselves, because we don't want to pretend that we have a flotation device of grace that we can't lose, because then our eyes end up on ourselves. Our eyes ends up and the gospel ends up being announcing that people can have this Jesus who gives us the flotation device, and then we can just look at the flotation device and continue like fixating on the flotation device, which is this imputed righteousness, rather than looking at the Jesus who we look at, who lets us walk on the waters, who grabs a hold of us personally, and who we need to personally look at. And so the Catholic view is one in which we personally look at Christ, rather than psychologically making this into a mechanism. Because the thing is, the Catholic view preserves the uncertainty, but by uncertainty it allows for faith. The Protestant view, and ultimately, if everybody takes it differently, every human being, I'm not saying every Protestant is doing it wrong, but in general, as general principles, it makes us go into a view that is making it solid, pretending that we were standing on a plank. Or we could say Jesus gives you a surfboard to stand on. It's like that's the grace. Whatever it is. I'm trying to give you different metaphors to help you understand these ideas between that the Catholic and Protestant views have, so you can find as a Catholic a kind of assurance, because we need some type of assurance. We can't go through life in terror, and so let's continue to explain how we can leave behind this terror of being in these fluctuations. You can almost see that this answer to this terror is the gospel, the good news of Jesus. And the good news is Jesus. The good news is the mercy of God. The good news is that Jesus is there, keeping our eyes on him in a sense. We're trying to announce that there is a Jesus, that Jesus is merciful. That's the answer to our problem in a way. Um, the answer to our problem is the merciful Jesus. Now, we're not certain he's going to have mercy on us. We can't be. But we're certain, could be certain that he's merciful. And we should, I mean, it's not like we should turn to him and trust him because he's merciful. And that's faith, that's faith. The thing is that I think that the problem is that, we have, we essentially have, rather than wanting to have faith in God, we either have doubt or certainty. We either say, I'm going to be saved, or I'm not going to be saved, rather than I have faith that I'm going to be saved, because the thing is, the attitude that, we're going to be saved, we're going to be saved or we're not going to be saved, those are kind of fleshly attitudes. Whereas the spiritual attitude is trusting God, because literally it's about understanding that it's up to him ultimately. That's a spiritual attitude. Same thing with hope. We don't want to have despair or presumption. Those are both fleshly attitudes. We have hope. We don't want to live in maybe fear and hate, because we're going through life terrified, and then we're just cranky because we're like always being threatened. We want to have love for Jesus. We want to have love for Jesus and love for others, because we'll be able to have love if we have this type of proper security in God. We don't want those opposites. We want those healthy virtues. So here's the thing. We want to be looking at Jesus. We want to be looking at him as merciful. And the thing is, because he's merciful, there's should be a different quality to our fear of sin. And the thing is, we want to remember this. I think this is safe to say, because I'm trying to give you ideas that are solid without telling you that you're saved by faith alone. So we're trying to shore up the reality of our salvation cognitively, so we can know what to believe, so we're not terrified without believing something that's like leading us into something that would be a belief that isn't true or biblical, or in line with our Catholic tradition. So what we want is to understand that only damnation is 100% dangerous, and that even if you are in mortal sin, you cannot be 100% sure that you are damned. The problem is, a lot of times we feel as if we're 100% damned when we're only partially certain that we're in mortal sin. See, a scrupulous person is sure that they're damned, even if they're not sure that they've sinned. You're like, I don't know if I've sinned, but I'm definitely it feels like I'm going to hell, because you're so terrified. But the thing is, even if you committed a mortal sin, it wouldn't be scary if you knew that there was a merciful God that could pardon it and give you the graces necessary, and that it wasn't certain that you were going to hell. You shouldn't be 100% terrified. You should never be 100% terrified, because you just obviously really don't know what's going to happen. You don't 100% know that. You could be 99% certain that you're in mortal sin, but you can't be You can't know for certain anything. I mean, in a real way, and those type of things. You don't need you're not even required to have a certainty of faith. That you are in mortal sin. You're not supposed to believe. Oh, even if let's say I killed somebody and I meant it. Maybe there's a 1% chance that I'm not in mortal sin. I'm not supposed to believe that with the same certainty that I should believe that Jesus is God. And there's nothing defined dogma that I have mortally sinned. Maybe I was really scared of the guy and I punched him in the face and he happened to die. It's like, I don't know if it's a mortal sin. It could be, very much so. But, the thing is, we don't know 100%, and we're not required to. So the thing is, you could see this deep fear that people have, when we're scrupulous and we're afraid. We could see that deep fear. We are 100% certain that we're going to hell. That's why we're scared. So the thing is, that's the reason why we're scared of the mortal sin, is because we're certain that it means damnation. It's certain that it means losing everything that we value. We're certain that it means losing everything, the life of God in us. We're certain that all these things are going on. And the thing that's really true is that, if we make an act of love, if we make a perfect act of contrition, perfect act of love or contrition, we're doing fine. We'll be able to be restored to a state of grace as long as we intend to go to confession. And the thing is, being scared of this and being like, oh, it's so hard to make a perfect act of love. It's so hard. That's just, you don't know that. You don't know how hard it is. Yeah, if you're living your whole life, not being with God. But the thing is, if you're living your whole life not being with God, not going to confession, don't bank on it. That's a dopey way of thinking about it. Being like, I don't have to go to confession or go to church. I'll just say, God, I love you before I die, and that's going to work. Well, you're not showing God that you love him by everything else you're doing. So you're not really, that advice doesn't apply. But the thing is, if you're doing everything else that you could possibly do to love God, and you're living in terrible fear, then, the thing really is to go to the other extreme and say, hey, it's not that hard to make an act of perfect love. Don't worry about it. I mean, the thing that's really messing with you actually is the fear. So the thing is, it's not so much the thing is like, it's not really that it's difficult. It's just that you're driving yourself bonkers. So, I mean, and don't worry, I'm preaching to my own fear as well. Don't worry, I'm just telling it clearly so that we can address this problem. So the thing again, only damnation is 100% dangerous. Only damnation goes up to code red. Mortal sin is not as dangerous as you think because you don't know for sure if you're going to be damned. And the thing is, you're looking at if you think you're 100% damned, you're looking at yourself again. That's what we've been talking about in this video. You're looking at yourself rather than looking at God to determine it. You're saying, yeah, it looks like I'm going to be damned. But you're taking it out of context because the context really is maybe you committed a mortal sin, but you committed a mortal sin and you have a merciful Savior, who can forgive you, who can give you grace, who wants you to come back. And so that's the thing. You're out of context. You're not thinking about the whole situation clearly if you're completely terrified. It's kind of like, we might say looking with uncertainty at self is fear, but looking at God with uncertainty is faith, hope, and love. Because we can't be certain of anything. We can't be certain of anything like the outcomes of things, those type of things. We can't have that type of certainty. Oh yeah, God's going to save me or this and that. But we have to look at God with faith. We don't want to look at ourselves with we don't want to just stop us staring at ourselves. So here's the thing, this also very much relates to, there was a therapist called Albert Ellis, who I don't endorse everything Albert Ellis says, but aside from that, we can really think about this. Albert Ellis would talk about there's different qualities of feelings. He would say if somebody thinks I must win first place in the race and they get second place, they're really upset. He says, okay, that's an insane way of thinking, because he's saying I must be first place. But you should say, oh, I really prefer to be first place, and then I'd be sad if I didn't get first place. But that's not the same thing as being devastated that you didn't get first place, because you have this irrational type of emotion. And so he had this therapy called rational emotive behavior therapy, and he would talk about having these kind of rational emotions, basically emotions that are moderated by reason. And in the same way, we could talk about emotions that are moderated by perspective of faith, because the thing is you shouldn't be fully terrified because you know that God is merciful. So you should have a kind of a faithful and rational fear of sin, not an irrational absolute terror of sin. And when we know this, these kind of ideas can allow us to understand that we are in error, and we can believe these ideas and not know that we know that we shouldn't remain in these states of fear, because we can really describe the type of fear that's erroneous. And these type of things are also told to us by the saints, like St. Pio tells us that we shouldn't have fallen into that complete despair when we sin because of the mercy of God. So we should always have that lively love for God for having fallen and hurt him, and that trust in him that he'll forgive us. Because the thing is, God could do whatever he wants to do. Even if we commit a mortal sin, there's a story, I believe, about a priest who he was a convert from Judaism, and he spent his whole life praying for his mother to convert to the Catholic Church. And it seemed that at her deathbed she died and didn't convert. And he said to Mary, why was it that I prayed to you fervently that she would convert? I prayed and I prayed and I prayed, but you didn't grant me this grace. And she said, I'm paraphrasing the story, I can't remember all the pieces to it. And essentially there was some type of revelation that he says, okay, actually what happened is I gave, in the last moments, I gave your mother supernatural knowledge that Catholicism was the true faith. We infused, God infused into her soul the graces of perfect contrition and repentance, and yes, she's in heaven. And so the thing we have to remember is that God can do anything, that our merciful God is powerful. God is able to save us. He's able to save us even if we're in mortal sin by giving us the graces necessary to repent. So the thing is, ultimately, when we think that we know the answer, we don't. We are lying to ourselves that we are definitely damned even if we discern that we're in mortal sin. And half the time we don't even know for sure if we're in mortal sin. when we're the type of person who's really scared of sin like this in this pathological way. So that's some of the ideas that I think should be helpful to us as we journey forward in faith. We want to have faith, hope, and love looking at God, not doubt, uncertainty, despair or presumption, or fear and hate looking at ourselves. So that's the thing. Keeping our eyes on Christ allows us to walk on the water. All these fluctuations in our experience. And he is the good news, the message that makes the big difference in how we live our spiritual and emotional lives. So I hope this is helpful to you.